Sex workers of Reddit, what is the saddest request/story you have with a client? The young man who came into a rural Australia brothel I was working in. He didn't want sex, he just wanted someone to hold him and touch him. For 2 hours. He barely spoke, but he did tell me his story. He lived on a large station, I'm talking around 10,000 kilometers squared. His parents lived in the farmhouse at the front of the property, and he lived at the other end of the property in a smaller house on his own. Like most farmers, he worked dawn till dusk most days. He rarely spoke to other humans, and he didn't have time to go out and meet women. I felt sad for him, because this was his life, and he had pretty much lost his social skills. My saddest is similar. This guy wanted me to hold and rock him, while he just cried. Like he didn't have another safe place to show emotion. I usually ended up crying too. I wish that kind of service was publicly available. Demand would be very high. I had a call through an escort service at about 6:30 am, way too early for me. I was sleeping. I kept ignoring my phone. They kept persisting. I finally picked up, agreed on an astronomical hourly rate, and the client agreed. I show up to his room about 7:30 am, and he answered, and to my surprise he's a tall, fit guy in his late 20s. He gave my full agreed rate. I could tell he had been drinking. We are sitting on the bed, and I'm trying to ask him questions to keep the mood light and friendly. And he starts to cry, like he's bawling his eyes out. I could tell he wasn't crying beforehand, just really wasted. I was so shocked I didn't know what to do, especially since he's this macho guy. I figured out he was in the armed forces. He told me he was in town for his father's funeral and his emotions and feelings were just hitting him, and he wanted someone to be there with him. So I stayed the whole time, and I let him talk and grieve, and held him for a bit. We didn't do anything sexual, except a kiss at the end, when my driver picked me up. He gave me his number, and told me to call him, if I was ever in his city. I still have it. Sounds like he got what he wanted, tbh. Kinda feel good vibe to this. And you showing up was very likely magnitudes cheaper than a psych. Where I live, some of them charge $1,200 hours and don't do the equivalent of out calls. Also, if you by accident say something extreme, they could report you to be admitted. Source: GF's friend has had extreme issues since a mugging and visited many different psychologists. You can hire sex workers just for this? I mean, is that part of your job? Usually at night I just can't stand to be alone with my thoughts. It's like my mind throws me any sadness it can get, and I just start crying. Nobody I loved has died recently, it's just how my life has been. And I talk to myself a lot. I fantasize someone being there with me, and listening to me, comforting me little by little. And I always just wish someone could be with me to actually listen. I don't want to pay attention to my mind. I just wish there was another person I could focus on. I mean, I can't hire anyone for anything. But I didn't think that was possible. Edit: I delete Reddit to save space on my phone for 1 hour or so, and wow, so many replies. Was thinking of deleting this comment later because it felt a little too personal, but thank you all of you for the many replies. 3 guys hiring 3 girls to celebrate the birth of one of the men's first son. Wife was still in hospital. This is sad indeed. My wholesome ass read this and originally thought they hired the women to have people at the hospital celebrating when the baby was born. Are you kidding me? I had a regular who was an older gentleman. Yes, we did do some deeds, but 95% of the time he just wanted company. I'd go with him grocery shopping, out to eat, to his apartment to cuddle and watch movies. He'd tell me stories about his family that had passed, stories from when he was a kid, stuff he learned when he got his pilot's license. I was at his funeral when he passed. I'll never forget such a sweet lonely man who just wanted human companionship. This is so wholesome. I would literally watch a film about this. Boy, do I have a website for you. I had a client who was a newbie. He booked me for a dinner date. During dinner, he started crying. He broke down and told me he had just gone through a terrible divorce. It sounded like he still loved her, but she was already engaged to her new man. I ended up seeing this client regularly and things devolved. The ex-wife took the kids out of state. The kids wanted their cats, so he gave them up too. Both his parents were dead, no siblings. He stopped seeing me for a while when he got a new girlfriend. She ended up using him for his money. The last time I saw him, he said he was thinking of moving to Mexico. He wanted to get away. I didn't hear from him, and life became busy for me. A few years later I thought of him randomly and looked him up. I found his obituary, and it was a few weeks after the last time I saw him. I think he killed himself, and I really feel terrible about it. It really haunts me. I had a science teacher in high school who was just wonderful. It's been 20 years since I had his class, but I still remember tons of lessons he did because he was engaging and enthusiastic. Great teacher, but he suffered from depression, and he was fairly transparent about it, in a way that high schoolers could tell. Not in a bad way, but he would be honest and say, sorry, I haven't gotten those tests graded. I've been having a hard time lately. I'll make an effort to get them done this weekend. One day a classmate of mine said he started tearing up in class randomly, and he confessed that he was going through a divorce. Years later, he was caught in a prostitution sting, and because he's a teacher, he lost his ability to teach ever, went on the sex offender list. He committed suicide not long after. I will fight for legalization of safe sex work in my state, so that this crap doesn't happen again. A genuinely good man and a great teacher is dead, because he just needed someone to care about him when he was vulnerable, and our society took everything away from him for it. We need better mental health options too, but I'm just glad that your client was able to come to you for what he needed, even if it didn't heal everything. Edit: so some of the details I remembered a bit off. He wasn't fired, he was put on leave. I think it was a rumor he was facing the sex offender registry, but it's possible he was just facing blacklisting. It was 6 years ago, not 10. https www.chicagotribune.com Zbrbsk Kristala Keticha Prostitutionsteenmer 20,150,220 story.html. Well, just know that you helped him in some way. He wanted someone to listen and you listened. I have a client who gives me an allowance just to go and see his mom. Absolutely nothing sexual. I just have lunch or dinner with her a few times a week, hang out and talk. She doesn't live alone, he's got a whole staff to care for her, but she gets lonely. Honestly, if he'd stop giving me the allowance, I probably wouldn't stop coming. It makes me kinda sad when I think that this dude can afford to spend a lump sum on me, but can't afford to lose a day of work to see his mom. Wait, does the mom know what you do though, if you don't mind? Or does she just think you're his so? I'm not a swear, but I used to work for a very wealthy family to sit with their disabled sister and provide her company. All she could talk about was her siblings and how much she loved them, and only one would regularly visit, usually every other week, for maybe 20 minutes at a time. She lived 2 miles away. Crazy how people will just throw money at an issue regarding their family rather than being there for them.